It's Talk Funny, a podcast by Mark Bailey and comics from all over. These comics ended up in Japan because the Witness Protection Program ran out of Montana cabins to hide these degenerate reoffenders. The Talk Funny podcast from Nagoyaradio.com and Nagoyacomedy. Here's Mark Bailey.
Here's Mark Bailey.
And we're back with Steve B. Howard. I'm Mark Bailey, and this is Talk Funny. Welcome back, Steve. And one of our topics we wanted to cover is Japan. I mean, this podcast is about people that ended up in Japan or doing comedy in Japan, but also a lot of us doing, full-time day jobs and raising kids and being married, most likely to Japanese people. So, what are your experiences? It's winning the comedy lottery, by the way, living in Japan as a foreigner.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I probably would estimate, 75-80% of my material comes from being married and living in Japan. So
yeah, being in Japan as a foreigner, that's the silver medal, and then the gold medal is being married in Japan with a Japanese wife.
Yeah.
You learn so many things. Like I learned that even though I never had a cavity before the age of 28 and my wife doesn't even have her real teeth anymore, apparently I was brushing my teeth incorrectly.
Yeah.
Because she knows the best way.
Yeah.
And she also knows the best way to eat a hamburger.
Yeah.
Because of course that's traditional Japanese cuisine.
Right.
Of course she would know. I mean, why would a foreigner know anything about anything? So what are you able to talk about being... What does your wife give? Oh, by the way, your wife just emailed you. Do not have the green light for today. You're going to have to.
Yeah.
This podcast never happened.
Yeah. I was supposed to be home hours ago.
Well, that's something I was talking about with Tim before. Is I said, when I tell people, they're like, "Do you know that bar that was around in the early 2000s?" No, I was a stay-at-home dad seriously, I was for 18 years, and I had a morning drive radio show. So I went to bed at 9. It means I had to get my kids in bed by 8. Mm-hmm. So I didn't get out to bars. So when I say that to foreigners, they're like, "Well, I don't go to bars a lot." No, what I'm saying is I never went, and I only do it now because it's work, and I'm doing comedy. But I never hung out in bars, and no casting aspersions on anyone. For hanging out at bars. But I told Tim, I said, I had to be home with my kids. What I guess I didn't mention is that because my wife worked nights, if I wasn't home with the kids, nobody's home with the kids. And they're 4 and 6 at the time. Yeah. That's why. And Tim said something like, well, I had to be there too, but I wasn't. Well, somebody was. That's the point. Yeah. But nobody was there. That's why I had to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I was a stay-at-home dad. So when my kids grew up and moved out, or one of them is about to move out and the other one already did, I'm the one that got empty nest syndrome. What kind of things amuse you about living in Japan or being married to Japanese?
One of the things you mentioned about what's the name of the New Year's song? What's the
Auld Lang Syne?
Yeah, so when I first came to Japan, I was in a department store with my wife, and that started playing because the department store was closing. And I said to my wife, well, why are they playing the New Year song? And she's like, no, that's a Japanese song. I'm like, no, that's Scottish, I believe. And fortunately, at that time, we had Wikipedia, and I could go on and show her that, no, that actually is not a Japanese song at all. But that was one of the little arguments that we had, or debates we had when I first came to Japan. We
were at a department store when my kids were small, and at Apita, when they closed, they play Silent Night. And my kids there were no lyrics to it, but my kids they always called it Apita song, Apita song. And my wife was telling me that was. I said, I know I'm Jewish, but I'm still going to defend that that's not a Japanese. Yeah. That's not a Japanese song. But apparently, My Way is also Japanese. So when I first came here for karaoke, there was only 2 English songs you could sing. It was Yesterday by the Beatles and My Way by Frank Sinatra. And I've still memorized those songs because I was dragged into karaoke for so long. Yeah. For my wife, being married to Japanese, is she had these bizarre. It's kind of like witch doctors, these bizarre rituals. So I learned that there's outside dirt and there's inside dirt. Yeah. And so I was using the wrong broom. I was using the outside broom for the inside dirt, which you were supposed to take the inside dirt and put it outside. So isn't all dirt outside dirt? Where did that dirt? The dirt didn't come from the tiles. Yeah. Wasn't it brought in from the outside? And I'm just taking it back. And she said that you're using the clean broom for the dirty dirt. Right. But you should only use the dirty broom for the dirty dirt and the clean broom for the clean dirt. I'm like, well, if the dirt is so clean, why don't we make tea out of it? It's dirt is dirt, right? But obviously I'm wrong.
Yeah, sometimes Western logic is not a good tactic to try to use with your wife, Japanese wife.
And sometimes I get screamed at because I open up the refrigerator and I don't know where something is. So I keep it open so I can find what I'm looking for. And she said, "You're doing it the wrong way. What you do is you ask me and I tell you where it is. You open it and you pick on the top right where I told you it is." But that's not where it is either, because she's like, "Was it on the top right?" I'm like, "It wasn't on any of the top shelf at all. Where was it?" "It was in the middle." She goes, "Well, you must have put it back wrong." I didn't touch it. I couldn't find it, right? So I never realized, like George Carlin said, is like he didn't marry Mrs. Right. He married Mrs. Always Right.
Yeah, and I got in trouble one time for wearing the indoor slippers outside for 3 seconds to grab the newspaper when there's, 7 o'clock in the morning when none of our neighbors will ever possibly see me. But
have you ever? I've done this in front of our in-laws, where of course you're a leper forever. You come back from the restroom with the restroom slippers on.
Yeah.
So you use the restroom slippers on the concrete,
right,
where regular shoes go, which is filthy apparently. But the toilet is supposed to be filthier. So it's like, why don't you just pick like one room that nobody's allowed to go into? You're so afraid of dirt, but you don't refrigerate your eggs. So you never heard of Louis Pasteur.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, if the eggs are bad, then the storekeeper just doesn't have them out. Okay.
Apparently, raw chicken meat sitting out. They haven't heard of botulism either.
My wife, she thought she was treating me to something one time. They had sashimi. There was raw chicken. It's a very famous Nagoya restaurant here. And I ate it and I got sick. I had to go to the doctor, and I definitely had salmonella and food poisoning. And she goes, "Well, it could have been something you ate after that. What did you eat after that?" I said, "Well, the next day I ate soba." She said, "Well, it could have been the soba." Yeah, because soba is very famous for salmonella.
Right.
Those chickens, they just bathe in the soba before they're cut up and served raw. And she's like, "Why wouldn't that be okay?" And I said, "Well, salmonella." I said, don't give me raw pork while you're at it. There's a thing called trichinosis. Here's an idea. Why don't you read up on like cooking? There's a reason other countries cook food. Because you used to die if you didn't.
Yeah. I actually, my second year in Japan, I did a really stupid lemon juice fast, but I ended up massively dehydrating myself, and I had to kind of rush to the hospital. And the doctor's office, I go into the doctor's office, and he's going to check me out, and sitting on his desk is an ashtray full of cigarettes. And if I hadn't have been so sick, I would have just turned around and walked out. It's like, the doctor is supposed to be checking my health, and he's got an ashtray full of cigarettes.
Yeah, that happened to me when I had an ulcer, and the doctor said, "Okay." He gave me another form to fill out, and he goes, I'll be right back. So he went to go take a smoking break. I looked at him. I had to go to the restroom, and I passed all the doctors in the hall. When he came back, he was lecturing me about my lifestyle choices. So if you start smoking, you won't have as many ulcers eventually.
Yeah.
You'll have less because you'll live less longer. Let's move on to gaijin with children. So Steve and I both have kids. Mine are much older. How old is Kai?
He's 6 going on 7. He'll be 7 in November. So
your wife has not raised children before, right?
No.
But she obviously knows better than you, right? Has she told you that?
Well, and I'll give her credit. Sometimes she definitely knows better. I think the house is run much differently when it's just me and him versus all three of us. So,
my wife, of course, she was working at night, so I tried to be a fun dad. So the kids want to play. We have a house, and kids want to play hide and seek. So they were hiding in creative places, which you do as a kid, and then one of the kids hid in the cupboard where my wife keeps the pots and pans. Apparently, that's a sacred place, and so when she got home, the kids were like, we played hide and seek, we hid in all kinds of places, we hid in the closet, and we hid there, and blah, and Dad never found us, And we hid over there, and she's like, "You hid where?" "We hid over there, under the oven." "You hid in where my pots and pans are kept?" "Yeah, we hid in there." And she opened it up, and then she started crying, and she's like, "Nothing is mine. People can just hide there." I'm like, "Yeah, the pots and pans. I'm pretty sure that I paid for the house, and I'm pretty sure I paid for the pots and pans since. What are you making, like $18 a month now on your stupid part-time job?" And I'm working 5 jobs meanwhile, And that was, I said, "I think you're missing the point. The point is, I was a fun dad, and they're going to always remember this."
Yeah.
And, you may not, and she's like, "Well, I'll always remember that you didn't respect my private space." And yeah, I don't think that's the point. These kids, they want to have fun, and, what do you want them to do? Play an Xbox, get bad eyesight, and become isolated? Or playing flashlight tag and hide and seek were some of my fondest memories when I was a kid.
Yeah, and in my case, I mean, I lived, in Washington State, outside of Seattle, but we kind of lived way out in kind of the rural countryside. And so the summertime, when I was a kid, when I was my son's age, we basically lived a, borderline hunter-gatherer existence in the summer. And sometimes some of the things my son does, for me, it's like, oh, okay, that's just boy behavior. But, I think for mothers, it's like horrified. Oh, my God, he just jumped off the slide. And I'm like, well, he didn't break anything. Didn't he break any bones? He's still walking. And
Right.
no major head injuries. But and then, of course, a lot of times it's my fault because I wasn't there, to stop him from jumping off or whatever.
I had an episode like that
Yeah.
when I took my daughter. She was two or three, 2 years old, and took her to Nagoyacomedy, which we live near there. And there's a fountain in Nagoyacomedy. It was a very hot day. My daughter said, I want to get in the pool. There were some other kids. There was not a pool. It was a fountain. And some other kids were in the fountain. And she goes, well, I want to get in the fountain. And I'm like, I want to be a fun dad, and I'm watching her. So I let her get in, and I'm standing there in case she falls. She's safe. And my wife calls me on the phone, and she's like, how's Marie, and how's she doing? Oh, she's having a lot of fun. She's swimming. She's like, where are you? I'm like, in Nagoyacomedy. She goes, there's no pool there. And I said, well, it's a fountain. She's like, well, you can't swim in a fountain. You can only swim in a pool. I said, well, last time I checked, if you can swim in any body of water if it's large enough. I don't know if science has made it here to Japan yet. It was like 12. We are by bicycle. We are 12 minutes from our house, but from the house to the fountain that she was swimming in. My wife was there in a minute.
Wow.
And she looked at me like I had drowned the cat, like I had set a dog on fire.
Yeah.
And didn't say a word to me, snatched Marie out, dried her off, and she said the fountain is filthy. You can't let her swim there. And I said, she's not drinking it, she's swimming in it.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been to the beach here? The beach is pretty dirty.
Right.
I said, well, you're counting on giving her a bath when we got back.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an idiot.
Yeah.
So Japanese wives can take even something fun like splashing around and having fun and swimming. It's like you've overdone your quota for fun for today. So to this day, if I said I'm going to take the kids to Nagoyacomedy, no, you can't take them. They're not allowed in the fountain. Matthew's 19. I don't think he's going to be getting in the fountain this time. She's like, don't you know how to treat a 2-year-old? And I said, the 2-year-old wanted to have fun. That's important to a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm not an idiot. I didn't leave her there for the day and then go shopping.
Yeah.
Like I'm watching her. I mean, how stupid do you think I am? I actually have like 10 times more educated than you are. I'm actually smarter than you. I don't like to push that, but it's actually true since you asked. You went to a stupid 2-year college. You have a 2-year community college degree, and I have more than that. I have a couple of masters. So if you want to bring up intelligence, you want to take the Mensa test again, we'll do it. Any hardships about anything difficult about foreigners raising kids here?
Well, I unfortunately, in my case too, I mean, I'm far from literate in Japanese. So like now he started first grade, and sometimes with his homework and stuff, I can't necessarily help him so much with it because I can't read the kanji. So that's a bit of and I admit that that's definitely a burden on my wife because she works full time too. She has a very, very difficult job. So she has to take sort of the lion's share of helping him with his homework. But I handle the helping him to learn English, so and learning to swim. That's my other job this summer, which he's getting pretty good now. So
that's good. And so, do you ever feel marooned in Japan? It's one of your topics.
Yeah.
You suggest is being married and marooned in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, of course, too, if you're married and then have kids, and then also if you, like in your case, own a house. We own our condominium. Fortunately, it's paid for, but at that point, the idea of ever going back to the United States and living there again is probably not very likely. So, and that I don't really get super depressed about it, but a lot of times I do think it would be nice to live back in my own country someday. But probably not. In all likelihood, not going to happen at this point. So,
one of the things that happens to foreigners in Japan that people may not realize is that I had really good jobs in radio and other and in government in the States. And then once you come to Japan, you get out of that queue and you're not in that community anymore. So when you go back, you start at the bottom again. Now you're bringing a wife who may not even speak English and has in my case, has no redeemable skills that I can find after 20-something years of marriage. Actually, hates work. Couldn't even be a secretary because she's not bilingual. Has no skills except probably spending money at Costco. She's good at that. But, now you've got one semi-qualified person and one unqualified person, and you're going to have to make a living, and in some parts of the country